Now, I don't think this government will behave like Nehru. I think they will be the type who will completely back somebody like Sam Manekshaw. Heck, Indira Gandhi didn't behave like Nehru. Indira Gandhi was 10 times the man her father ever was.
Yes.
Her father was nothing compared to her. So many, on that particular day, on 7th October, so many Hamas troops, we shouldn't call them troops, troops is a respectable word, terrorists, knew what the object and the mission were.
And the Israelis had no clue.
And the Israelis had no clue. How was there no signals, intel? Within 3 minutes of that Al-Shifa hospital of that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the rocket falling back on Al-Shifa hospital, 500 dead. How do you know 500 were dead? Ultimately, it turned out to something like 40-50 people dead. This is like a one-handed clap, boss. We get along fine. We don't need trade with you.
Yeah.
Right. This is literally like a beggar outside Antilla going and knocking on Neeta Bhabhi's Rolls Royce का दरवाजा saying, "Hey Neeta Bhabhi, तेरे पति को ना investment नहीं आता है, मेरे से बात कर, मैं तेरे को investment दूंगा। अब वैसे भी 2 कौड़ी दे देना इधर."
Abhijit, welcome back to the podcast. Always a pleasure to have you.
Adab Bhaijan, always happy to be here.
Jai Shri Ram, sir.
Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram.
So the last time we spoke was just before the October attack on Israel, the Hamas terrorist attack. And you recently went to Israel. Your first visit, I assume, after that attack.
Yes.
So what was your experience like?
I just came back yesterday, so I'm still a bit jet lagged. But, it was a failure. The way they see it is that it was a failure of deterrence.
Okay.
They believe that ever since 2006, which was the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon and the bombing of most of Lebanon in response to Hezbollah picking up the bodies of 5 Israeli soldiers. They believed that they had deterrence, that nobody would dream of doing that for at least a few years. We realized the limits of that because it's been about 17 years since that episode.
Yeah.
And clearly 17 years is enough to wipe your memory clean. And remember, for 5 soldiers, what they inflicted on Lebanon was horrible.
Yes.
And they were hoping that it'll serve as an object lesson so that other people won't do it. But the problem is when you're dealing with a death cult like Hamas, all these jihadis are basically death cults, right? They produce kids for them to die.
Yes.
For us, I would die for my dogs. You would die for your kids. Indian parents won't think twice about dying for their kids.
Indeed.
These people produce kids literally to sacrifice them. Right?
Yes.
And we shouldn't be surprised because that kind of child sacrifice has an old history in that particular place. You go to the Tophet, which was the old Phoenician where babies were literally, there was a fire lit in the groin of the god and Moloch, and babies were literally little young boys.
Infants.
Boys, specifically boys. It wasn't female sacrifice, it was kids under 1 year old, newborn male babies that were literally thrown alive into the fire. So this is a sort of cultural thing that has happened out there, and we should be surprised about it. The thing is, to the modern mind, it just sounds so horrific, where we don't realize that there are still people around with this kind of obsolete Bronze or Stone Age mindset that has still survived into the modern day and age. But that's what we saw. And they are now seriously questioning their idea of deterrence.
Okay.
And I would suggest that they never really had deterrence. What they had was they had attrited their enemy to the point where the enemy would not consider another round. And I would suggest, at least I've been suggesting to the Israelis, that they shouldn't look at it as deterrence. They should look at it as a war of attrition. That you need to consistently keep their weapon stocks and troop levels below a certain threshold, because the moment it crosses a certain threshold, it's only a matter of time before they attack you. There's no more deterrence at that point. So I would just, my whole thing is to counter the very notion of deterrence in itself.
Okay. Right. So deterrence, there was no deterrence essentially.
There was no deterrence.
Now, what about this attack that the Hamas terrorists made on Israel? Was that not an intelligence failure? 50 years on after the biggest failure, the Yom Kippur War.
It was both a tactical and an intel failure. See, static defenses never work, right? So you look at the Great Wall of China.
Yes.
You look at the Maginot Line. You look at the Bar-Lev Line, which was same Yom Kippur. Exactly what 50 years before this.
Yes.
1973. So literally 50 years
50
before.
years. Yeah.
They should have known static defenses don't work. You know, the only time the Great Wall has worked was under the Tang and Ming dynasties, where it was used as a base for active forward defense. When you go on razzias north into Mongolia and then fall back, use the line almost as a large fortress in that sense, but don't just sit idly behind it.
Yeah.
Here they were sitting idly behind a static defense. And you know, the easiest thing to do is to breach a static defense. Okay. This was number one. So I think it was a failure of imagination. It was a tactical failure to begin with, not believing that a static defense would fail. The second issue was I'm not so sold on the intel failure per se, because there are, you know, an intel failure is never a binary. It's like, you know, a missile launch is never a binary. A missile launch, say, fails in the last 10 minutes. In which case, you know, the takeoff, everything was perfect. Something in the terminal guidance went wrong. So it's not the entire thing was a failure.
Yes.
It was a 99% success and 1%, but the cost of that 1% failure
Was the entire mission. Yeah.
So there were, again, I believe it was a tactical failure, and the intel failure is quite crucial out here, because there was a female IDF officer who predicted something like this would happen.
Even the Egyptians alleged that they have.
Well, the
they had given some
Egyptians, you know, that was some guy farting apparently. It wasn't really it wasn't actionable intelligence.
Okay.
You know, this is like me saying, "Oh, Abhijit, how you been? You know, I get this worry sometimes that your hair is turning grey.
Okay.
You should use dye." Like, dude, like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. So, you know, that wasn't. But this lady intel analyst actually gave, she wove the clues together quite accurately.
I see.
Now, the issue is when a warning like that comes on your table, and 99 people are telling you, well, that's not the way intelligence is woven. You have this preconceived notion that you've achieved deterrence. Because Hamas was also doing maskirovka in their own way, which is they were giving out these signs that they wanted peace.
Okay.
Right. So clearly the Israelis were like, fine, it may happen, but it won't. The curious thing is, we went to the, what center was it in the north, in Haifa, which was showing us a video from 10 years back. I'll give you the video if you want to play it during the thing.
Yeah.
It was a 10-year-old video that was simulating exactly this kind of attack, but from the north.
From the north.
From the north, where what would happen is Hezbollah troops would cross over. They would make a beeline for Nahariya, which is the northernmost big city, and they would use them as hostages. They would kill a lot of people for effect, and they would use them as hostages, large-scale hostages, in order to, and it's up on YouTube, by the way.
I see.
Yeah. And use them as hostages to prevent an Israeli attack. And the belief there is that if you take enough, 5 is not enough. Because the Israelis had already determined that Humvee, because of the way it had been destroyed, those troops were pretty much dead in 2006. But here, if you have hale and hearty in health hostages, a sizable number, there's a critical number beyond which the Israelis will not attack.
Okay.
That's Hezbollah's working theory. So it was kind of that plan that got operationalized in the south by Hamas. Which shows you the kind of, people think Shia Sunni will not talk to each other, but clearly they do talk to each other and they do ideate these things. This was the second intel failure. The third intel failure was, you know, this, so many, on that particular day, on 7th October, so many Hamas troops, we shouldn't call them troops, troops is a respectable word, terrorists, knew what the object and the mission were.
And the Israelis had no clue.
And the Israelis had no clue.
No
How
human.
was there no signals, intel, or human? Human triggers SIGINT.
Yes.
Or sometimes SIGINT can direct human.
Yes.
One should act as the trigger for the other.
Yes.
How come neither of these were triggered?
That's the question.
And given that it started off with a massive volley of rockets, the largest volley of rockets we've seen in a long time, how did they not know that rockets were being assembled at a certain launching point? So the collective intel failure.
Massive.
Massive, right?
And then you have these hang gliders, motorized hang
So
gliders.
those
coming in.
hang gliders are nothing new. They're very difficult to detect because what
Okay.
happens is, if you look at the fan of a hang glider, it's very similar to a commercial cooling fan that you install in a factory.
Okay.
Right, and the material is all polymer-based, plastic-based stuff that can be folded and
So it doesn't
things
turn
like
up on the radar.
It doesn't turn up on the radar, and it doesn't really trigger any intel alerts as well per se.
Okay.
Because see, by themselves, they wouldn't have been very powerful. Because somebody would have seen a hang glider coming in. Israel is a very armed society, so they would immediately have overcome it. Here, the potency of it lay in the fact that the defenses had already been suppressed.
Okay.
And these guys came into a defense suppressed environment.
Uh-huh.
So it was almost like an F-16 coming in, a paveway F-16 comes in after an AMRAM, an HARM armed F-16 has already suppressed all the
Radars and all that.
air defense batteries
Yes.
and things like that. So it was kind of like that happened, which is where it became potent.
Okay.
So each one, so this was the thing, it was the accretion of potency. Individually, none of it was enough to trigger. But it was the accretion of potency that happened. I don't think Hamas also realized how well their redundancy overcoming measures would work.
Okay.
So for example, first, the remote sensors on the border were taken out. Then the remote machine guns were taken out. And they fully expected, once both the remote sensors and the remote machine guns are taken out, enough Humvees will come that can't be taken out in numbers. But no, the Israelis only sent 1 or 2 or 3 Humvees, which were taken out instantly.
Uh-huh.
Then, they sent just 1 Merkava. That was the 4th redundancy. And when the Merkava, the tank finally comes, which is one of the most heavily armed tanks, what's its weak point? It's always the top. The top is always the weakest point of a tank. Which, given what we've been seeing in Ukraine over the last 2 years,
Yes.
they should have known. Now they've, come up with this thing where they put a little, weld on a little cage.
Grill kind of thing.
Yeah, on top of it. But they sent that in, and the Merkavot were also taken out.
Yeah.
So, it was 4 stages of redundancy that fell one after the other after the other. And the problem was because everybody was getting killed, nobody could convey back the whole situational awareness or analysis back to headquarters. So headquarters itself was then operating in the blind, right? And then we realized something because at Nahalos and Be'eri especially, one of the things we realized was, and Sderot, in Sderot, sirens go off. In Be'eri, it's a different kind of a siren. There's a public service message that goes, get into your shelters, and you've got 15 seconds to get into your shelter. There is no public address system anywhere telling people what the nature of the threat is. Right? So you've got speakers, but they can't say, look, armed people have come in with RPGs, they're going around killing people door to door to door. So they thought it was rockets coming in, as opposed to the fact where they could have just gone to where their guns were stored, come out, organized, and then fought back. And see, that was a huge failure that happened, which, think about it, it was just a single...
A 15-second message would have sufficed.
Exactly. Yeah. And they weren't prepared for that because they never thought that something like this could happen. So it was a string of loopholes which were very clearly exploited. And you know what the scariest thing was? It was all the Gazans who were employed by these kibbutzes that went and gave accurate numbers to Hamas as to where they were hiding, where the safe rooms in each. They knew exactly where the safe rooms in each individual houses were. They knew exactly what the weakness of each individual house was. So, they knew, for example, that every front door is a secure front door. Heavy, hard metal one to protect against terrorists, which you can't open, so they used RPGs. But the safe room, because if a rocket hits it and it deforms, you want to evacuate your family.
Yes.
So you're not allowed to have locks and things like that on that door, right? So it's like swinging hotel doors, basically.
Okay.
And most of them were trying to keep that shut when they got shot in their hands and things like that, and they came in. So they knew all of this. They planned sequentially for what was going to happen. And the problem was they came in early in the morning where half the troops that could have been deployed were sleeping.
Okay.
The troops themselves had no idea what was happening because all the initial units that were sent as per protocol were all defeated. Because they weren't sent in adequate numbers. And this is where the over-reliance on machinery. Machinery can only aid human beings. There's no substitute ultimately for a human being. And human beings in numbers.
In numbers.
That some survive and can convey a full operational message back.
Right.
But that's what happened, and cumulatively, I don't know how they're going to deal with it, but my initial assessment of it is the language that I was hearing in Jerusalem is that they're still talking in the language of deterrence.
Okay.
Which I don't think is a useful conversation to have anymore. I don't think if you come from a mindset of chickens for KFC, you can't deter the chicken showing them videos of what happens to KFC chickens. This is an entire generation of Gazans that has been brought up on bloodlust. And the desire for martyrdom. I don't think there's anything. I don't even think this particular campaign that's flattened most of Gaza because it's all co-located infrastructure. You see, the Israelis will never keep military infrastructure near a civilian point.
They won't.
The Palestinians will see to it that all military, not only will it be kept near a civilian point, it will be kept inside a school,
a hospital,
or a children's nursery, or a hospital. Because that is where the threshold of Israeli tolerance, the Israelis will keep the boss, we can't hit a hospital, we can't hit a school, we can't hit. Of course, now they're finally doing it because that 7th October crossed a certain threshold of tolerance. But in normal circumstances, they won't. And I would argue that that is what needs to change because you need to attrit them to keep it below the threshold rather than look at this in terms of deterrence anymore.
So what do you think Israel needs to do going forward? They have essentially hit lots of targets in Gaza. They've flattened parts of Gaza. There's the Hezbollah threat that's always brewing on the northern border. What do you think Israel needs to do going forward? How do you see things playing out?
One by one, I guess in Gaza what needs to happen is, first of all, a full-blown de-radicalization program.
That takes time.
That takes time.
Yes.
So in the meantime, what you do is you actually need a police state.
Okay.
Which will be absolutely ruthless against, say, like something like what Mirziyoyev or who was Mirziyoyev's predecessor in Uzbekistan? Who was much worse?
Nazarbayev.
No, that's in Kazakhstan.
That's Kazakhstan. Nursultan Nazarbayev,
Sapar Murat Niyazov, no, that was Turkmenbashi. But you know who Mirziyoyev's predecessor was? Something like that out there, which delivers services, delivers a high standard of living, but does not tolerate any Islamic indoctrination.
It reminds me of Andijan.
Exactly. Right. So you need to have that because Hamas is really getting hammered. Let's be clear. First of all, I refuse to accept this 30,000 dead figure. I don't think people should repeat it because it's a Hamas figure. Okay. So you're basically spreading Hamas propaganda because, counting people takes time, boss.
Yes.
You can't just say how many people are dead, right? The Israelis took almost a week to finalize the numbers. And even that, they had to scale it back because some had been double counted and things like that, right? Here, within 3 minutes of that Al-Shifa hospital of that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the rocket falling back on Al-Shifa hospital, 500 dead. How do you know 500 were dead? Ultimately, it turned out to something like 40-50 people dead. So I would say the total number of deaths here also would be 1/10 to 1/3 of what Hamas is telling you, number one. Because we all know, Israel isn't going to use a precision-guided munition that costs $1 million just to take down a building which for no reason at all. There has to be something high value enough to justify $1 million piece of munition coming down on a target.
Yes.
So what happens out here is I wouldn't put the death toll to more than about 10 to 12,000. And out of that, a very, very high percentage of them are going to be Hamas.
Yeah.
Okay. It may be higher. Let's say it is 30,000, in which case the proportion of civilians is to Hamas killed would be much higher in Hamas terms than civil terms, or it would be roughly equal. And the civilian casualties are entirely because Hamas is using them as human shields.
Yes.
Right? Now what happens is, what you need is filters along where Khan Yunis and south, where non-combatants are allowed back up north and a reconstruction program takes place. And the Israeli army keeps moving south, south, south till the whole of Rafah is sanitized of Hamas. Then you have a proper government out there that's very effective, that's absolutely ruthless when it comes to Hamas or any kind of these jihadist ideologies. Remember, we think only of Hamas out there. They actually have some 15, 20 different nut job organizations out there, which go around doing the same thing. I mean, naam ke vaste, this is like how Pakistan concocts a boutique of nut jobs. They have their own little, this nut mix that they serve you on airlines. Pecans and walnuts and peanuts. Pecans and walnuts are expensive. They never give you that. They give you all the sasta stuff. Peanuts and cashew nuts and almonds and things mixed.
Yeah.
And wasabi hard peas and things like that all mixed up. So it's like that. It's a nut job mix. That would have to be sanitized, and then you settle this. Hezbollah is a much, much tougher problem because remember, Gaza is a fairly easy to negotiate strip. It's not too broad, it's not too wide, it's all flat land.
Yeah.
More or less flat land. Lebanon is a geographic nightmare. It's all the, the anti-Lebanon, the Lebanon mountains, the anti-Lebanon mountains. It's a very, very hilly tract.
Yeah.
And it's literally made for guerrilla warfare. The problem is you can do what you did in 2006, which then forces Hezbollah's hands to control itself. But see, the problem is the control over Hezbollah isn't in Beirut. The control over Hezbollah is in Tehran.
There you go.
So what do you do? Unless a cost is inflicted on Tehran, there will be no checks or balances on Hezbollah. And this is where the entire question of what to do comes in for the Israelis. The Israelis know that, which is why I think moving towards attrition is a much better route than moving towards deterrence. To persistently keep Hezbollah's troop and basically, to quote Yitzhak Rabin, he used to say, I'm going to fight terror like there is no peace, and I'm going to make peace as if there is no war.
Okay.
And I think that's the best solution, to constantly keep hitting Hezbollah every single day, day after day. Anywhere you find a troop concentration, anywhere you see a Hezbollah truck, anywhere you see a Hezbollah flag, hit it.
What do you make of the recent strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus? First of all, was it Israel? And now the Iranians are in a position where they have to respond, or they lose face, or they lose credibility. But if they respond, they get drawn into a larger conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all know it's Israel.
We know that.
Of course, the Israelis refuse to admit it.
Yes.
There's been no, we don't know who blew up the Syrian nuclear reactor, which apparently, according to the Syrians, never existed. Which the Israelis have finally, I think, admitted that, well, not officially, but
kind of.
They kind of admitted they did it. I think it follows from what I told you before. They have no avenue of tamping down Hezbollah till Tehran can be punished. And I think this was one of the things they did to draw Tehran into some kind of a conflict for it to be done. But on the other hand, remember, it might not even be that calculating, because these guys were active in the campaign against Israel right now. They were giving orders to both Hamas and to Hezbollah. And at some point, you have to make a calculation about taking out the leadership, which is what they did. Now, it could be one of the two. It could be grand strategy, which is to drag Iran in and inflict punishment on Tehran, or it could be a very localized thing. I think the fact that they refuse to take responsibility for it points towards the second explanation, which is that it's localized, because it gives Iran room to save face. Which is why I suspect when Iran hits back, they'll use proxies and it won't be a direct hit.
Not a direct
I suspect.
Okay.
I could be wrong. These things are very difficult to predict. It's, because you can predict based on rationality. You can't predict based on irrationality.
Correct.
Or what you perceive to be irrationality.
Yes.
Right. Let's see. The calculus, as far as I'm concerned, in Tehran would be, how do we not end up looking like cucks, but we don't end up doing something that gets a ferocious Israeli response? How do we, they were very smart in responding to the attack on Qasem Soleimani. They hit an American base, but that attack killed nobody. It just injured some people here and there, apparently, which was mostly eardrums bursting because of the noise, apparently, and there was no American retaliation for that. I think they're finding the conversations right now would be one of calibration.
What do you make of the Iranian involvement in the Gulf of Aden region, the Red Sea region, the Houthis? They are using the Houthis also as a proxy to interdict Western shipping.
They use every Shia around as a proxy. This has sort of been their game since the 1980s, where they've weaponized Shia populations everywhere, except India, because in all those places the Shias are suppressed. In India, the Shias are very rich. So they've stopped thinking about, voting or thinking in identity terms. And I would say 60% of the Shia, 60-70% of the Shias here end up voting for BJP. The Sayyidina comes out openly and tells his community, vote for the BJP. If you don't vote for the BJP, you will be socially boycotted. The Ismailis are anyway, Ismailis, you can't really tell if they're Hindu or Muslim, they all come out dancing Garba. Have you seen all you should go watch these YouTube videos of receiving His Highness the Aga Khan in Florida. And they're all wearing bindis and dancing Garba to receive Aga Khan. And I'm like, maze ka. And you look at people like Aga Khanis here, Ismailis here, like Shehzad and Tehseen Poonawala. They are so very happy. They'll tattoo Ram Naam on their hands and Om on their hands and Mandir jayenge. Shehzad's mother used to do seva at the Mandir and things like that. So they're like, see, the Aga Khan comes insanely wealthy. They don't have time for this kind of, and they look after the community, and they don't have time for this kind of crap, right? You even look at people like the Jafris, the Twelvers, which is the Iran denomination. Because they came under suspicion in Kashmir of being the India ka mukhbirs, informants of India after the Pandits got kicked out. They tend to vote for the BJP. So there's a whole bunch of these Shias who vote for the BJP. And this creates problems for India, because then we can't come out completely in favor of Israel as well. Because the BJP needs those Shia votes. And the Shias haven't been a problem, right? There's only been one Shia terrorist ever caught in Kashmir, if I remember right.
I see.
And there was that Shia terrorism. The only Shia terrorism we've had in India is that one bomb that horribly injured the Israeli defense consul in 2013 or 2014, if you remember, not far from here in what was then Aurangzeb Road and is now APJ Abdul Kalam Road. The Sunnis are the real issue out here, which isn't really that much of an issue if you look at it from the BJP terms. So what happens is they can't weaponize Indian Shias. But you look at Yemen, the Shias have been consistently in war or being crushed by the Sunnis in what is an overwhelmingly hardcore Sunni peninsula. In Oman, there's never a problem, because the Kharijites used to be very hardcore in the time of the Prophet, but now they're like, Oman had the first Hindu temple and it was like 20-30 years before that it was built. Because, it's a small place where, anybody can go meet the Sultan of Oman. You can it's like extended family, you go there. Like I know an Indian community, Kashmiri Pandits living out there, that made a carpet in his image in silk and gave it to him, and they got called into court and were thanked and whatever.
I see.
The Emirates has liberalized massively. So you can't weaponize Shias in whatever Shias are left out there. The real problem are the Bahraini, the Yemeni, and the Saudi Shias, because the Saudi Shias have been oppressed for quite some time. And they sit on all the oil, which is close to the Kuwait border. The Bahrain is a Shia majority country, which has a Wahhabi ruling class, and that needs to be kept in control. And Yemen we've already discussed. So these have been weaponized. Lebanon, again, the same problem. In the 1920 census, which was the last census that Lebanon ever held, the Shias were the least of the population, then the Sunnis, and then the Christians. The Christians were the highest population. So they got an executive presidency with all the power. The prime minister, who did not have power, was meant to be the Sunni. And the speaker of parliament was meant to be Shia. But since then, demographics have changed so much that it's now become a Shia majority, possibly a Shia absolute majority. But they will never hold a census, because a census means a loss of political power. So the deal has become, the Taif Accords, which ended that war, meant that the president would continue to be a Christian, but executive power would move to the prime minister, who was a Sunni, because it was assumed that Sunnis had become the majority, which we know was an erroneous thing, because it was actually the Shias who were in majority.
I see.
So there has been a renegotiation of power, not official, where Sunnis will shut up and keep quiet, though they hold, on paper, they hold a political power. But the real political power on the ground will be wielded by Hezbollah and Amal. And Hezbollah really runs that country. You can't do anything in that country without Hezbollah saying so, because if you do, you will end up like Rafiq Hariri in 1,000 pieces strewn all over. Right? So that's how Lebanon has become. Now, all of these ones are weaponized proxies, including Iraq, which we no longer talk about.
Iraq too.
America, thankfully, all the Shias are very thankful to America that they took the country from a Sunni dictator and gave it over to Iran. They've essentially made it an Iranian proxy in that sense. So, Iran uses these proxies very, very well. And we keep coming back to how even India never really found a solution to these proxies, right? When those proxies attack you, you can't hit them. You end up hitting everybody except them. So the pain is decentralized, the benefits are centralized. How do you deal with that? There's no answer to it. And it's a very potent mechanism that Iran has, because remember, ever since 79, where Iran, thanks to its own stupidity, got isolated by everyone. They were the only people who, at peak Afghan civil war, were hated by the USSR, the USA, and Israel. Nobody can be that stupid. So, while Iranian diplomats are tactically brilliant, they're dealing with a fundamentally stupid strategy. And so what ends up happening is that the Gulf now is much richer than Iran. Iran at one point was the most industrialized state. It had a higher per capita income than South Korea and Taiwan. It was on... Today, had that trajectory under the Shah continued, they would have probably been richer than Israel, richer than Taiwan, richer than South Korea, most possibly, had a stable trajectory continued. Fully industrialized state. But today, they are what they are. And the Gulf has much higher accretion of power, military power, political power, diplomatic power, everything. And the only way you counter that is through terrorism. It's always the weaker power that resorts to terrorism, right? North Korea will resort to terrorism, though they don't have proxies. They just deny attacks like the sinking of the Chonan and things like that. Or Pakistan will use terrorists against India, or Iran will use terrorists all over the region.
Talking about stupidity and geopolitical ineptness, what about Armenia? So we have a Shia majority or a large Shia population in Azerbaijan, which is not essentially friendly with Iran. Iran is working against the interests of Azerbaijan. Iran is supporting this Armenia. Christian nation, Armenia, but Armenia has a magnificently stupid country. The kind of choices they've made since the 90s. Could you talk about what's happening there?
Yeah. You know what Abba Eban used to say about the Arabs? They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think that would exactly apply to the Armenians.
The Armenians, yeah.
You have Azeris. Now, Ayatollah Khamenei is an Azeri. He's an ethnic Azeri.
Indeed, there you go.
And in spite of that, the Iranians are wholeheartedly supporting the Armenians.
The Christians.
Christian Armenians.
Yeah.
Because ethnically, when you go to Armenia, you see they're not very different from the Iranians at all.
Actually not.
Whereas the Azeris are Turks.
Turks.
Ethnically Turks.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter that Turkey is a Hanafi Turkic state supporting a Shia Turkic state.
Yes.
But both languages are kind of mutually intelligible because they're both Oghuz languages. And Armenia in all of this is compound stupidity and also compound betrayal, to be fair.
Oh yes, betrayal as well.
Because once they captured what is called Artsakh by them in what we call Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yes.
In the during the breakup of the Soviet Union.
88 to 94.
Yeah. 88 to 94. What did they do after that? In order for the CSTO, which is their alliance with Russia, to function, they should have annexed that land officially.
They should have.
They never annexed that land.
Yeah.
But the Russians also went on telling them, don't annex that land, don't annex that land. But at least when Russia annexed Donetsk and Lugansk, they should have done it saying, well, you annexed it, so why the hell shouldn't we annex it? So we annex it. They didn't. Or when Russia did South Ossetia and what was the other thing? South Ossetia and one more part, I forget which one, in Georgia. They should have done it. They did not. They did nothing of the sort. When they knew the Azeris had so much gas and were rearming, they did nothing.
Yes.
You have nobody but yourself to blame. And then you elect an idiot like Nikol Pashinyan, who your one friend left, which is the Russians, you go on antagonizing them.
Yes.
You try to build bridges with the Turks who are trying to kill you. What did you think was going to happen? And notice, there is no calls for Nikol Pashinyan to resign. They're all like...
He lost 2 wars essentially.
Yeah.
But he's still around.
But, I mean, if you want to engage in this kind of failure reinforcing behavior, Armenia has nobody but itself to blame for what has happened, essentially, right? And Russia also played dirty. Let's be clear about it. They should have allowed the Armenians to annex it and, it would have brought quietus to the situation.
Yes.
If nothing else. But even in spite of that, Russian troops who were deployed to manage what little ceasefire had been done allowed Azeri troops to go through.
Yes.
See, one country may be acting in bad faith, but that doesn't mean you give up your responsibilities. So both in Sri Lanka, both the Sinhala and the LTT ganged up against us. But we still acted in good faith.
Yes.
Russia played dirty.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about that. But not that Armenian hands were clean. And the Azeris, well, psychos.
Oh, yeah.
Complete psychos. They behaved exactly the way Hamas did on 7th of October.
Yes.
But that is their way of war. That's
the standard Turkic way of war.
It is the Turkic way of war.
Yeah.
The Arabs were much more civilized in the way they used to kill till this entire Turkic influence came on.
The ISIS thing happened, yeah?
Yeah, the ISIS thing. And ISIS themselves, isn't it curious? Everything ISIS does is not Arabic in nature, it is actually Turkic in nature.
Yes.
And they claim to be the purest of the pure.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, so you have Armenia, which is this incredibly inept nation, which is kind of struggling to survive today.
Yeah.
And India and Iran are cooperating in arming Armenia.
Yeah.
And Russia is okay with that. And
I don't think Russia's okay with that. It's just that Russia's washed its hands of the situation because they're like, tumko bhaan mein jana hai to jao.
There's also the danger that Armenia could become pro-US.
Which I think is a pipe dream, and I'll tell you why. They are depending on this sort of Greek-French-Indian alliance.
France as well, yeah.
To protect them. Rafales, Mirages, whatever. See, understand, European weapons are very expensive.
Yes.
They require a system of systems to operate.
Yeah.
Where does Armenia have the money?
They don't have the money.
They don't have the money. Indian weapons, let's not talk about them, but say Iranian weapons which have proven to be very effective, because Iran, we think we are France. That is India's problem, is that we have technology levels of Iran, but we think we're France. Iran does not think of itself even as Iran. It thinks of itself as Yemen. And it develops weapons which are very, very effective from that point of view, like these ultra-cheap drones.
The Shahed 2 drones and all that, yeah.
These Sasta missile boats, hundreds of missile boats, which can be very effective when used in numbers.
Yes.
They're much more realistic. Now, the question is, Iran is a big country that has a lot of propensity to bear pain.
Yes.
Is Armenia like that? I doubt that very much.
They have lost so much territory. They've such a small population left. I don't think they can take any more pain.
I don't think they can.
Yeah.
So, Armenia is acting out of desperation. I don't know if it'll work. Because asymmetric tactics involve a very, very heavy price on part of the asymmetric country. So let's see. It's like Iraq. You know, everybody talks about how America was defeated in Iraq. Sure. But how many troops did America lose? 2,000-3,000.
Yeah.
How many Iraqis died? Over a million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that the campaign you want to fight?
You don't want to fight that. Yeah.
And now it seems the Azeris are going to get expansionist because they want a land corridor to
Turkey.
To the patch of Azeri land that is cut off by Armenia.
Yeah, that part of, yeah.
I forget what that part's called.
Nakhchivan something?
Nakhchivan,
yeah.
That's it. They want a corridor to that. So let's see how this pans out. This might actually be Armenia's 1945 moment, where Armenia realizes it's got nothing to fight for and becomes completely subservient to Azerbaijan and the Turks. Which is kind of the path Pashinyan wanted to go, I would say.
Looks like that.
In a way. He's going to find out to his great cost. I think the issue is the Armenians are unfortunately going to be paying the price for Pashinyan's follies, delusions. But, well, look, we can't do anything about it. It's their country. They have to decide.
Yes. But this corridor, the pan-Turkic corridor, if they make it happen, which looks like it'll happen sometime soon, how does it change things for Turkey? It's the great Turkish dream, right? To have this corridor stretching all the way to Central Asia.
And they're being much more diplomatic about it this time, unlike the last time. You remember the last time there was this Davutoglu idea, which wasn't the old Ottoman Empire was a Mediterranean empire. The new Ottoman Empire was going to be a Central Asian empire, which went down very, very badly with everyone. This time they are playing their cards much better. They're allowing collective leadership. They're not claiming because we're the richest and most developed of all the Turkic states, we should be given primacy, etc., etc. They're allowing smaller countries to take the lead. But will it develop into anything tangible? I think not.
Okay.
Number one. Number two is every one of those countries faces a very different geopolitical reality. There's also severe geopolitical competition. So, for example, Russia is never going to allow Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan to join anything that threatens it or reduces its influence in any way.
Yes.
And in fact, the Kazakhs have been the wisest of the lot in the way that they have reduced Russian influence without doing anything provocative. They moved the capital from Almaty, which is beautiful, to ugly Astana in the north, precisely because they wanted to be very close to the Russian border to prevent any Russian border claims and things like that. You know, Almaty is actually shielded by mountains on all sides, so it stays relatively warm.
Okay.
Astana gets the full blast of Arctic winds, right? So the Kazakhs have played their game well, the Uzbeks and the Turkmens have played the game well. Ultimately, I suspect this new Turkic bloc will be more like SARC. It will be a toothless tiger.
Okay.
Okay. It'll be lovely. You'll have the peacock logo here. You'll have, I don't know what. What's that thing called? The Turkic cap which I wear. I should have actually worn my Turkic cap today. The Turkoman desert cap. Which actually looks like an Afro hairstyle, but anyway, they might have that lovely thing as a logo, but I don't think it'll go practically anywhere.
Okay.
And the second influence border zone that comes out here is the Iranian cultural influence. Remember, this area might have been Turkic ethnically, but they always looked up to Persia as the fountain of culture, not Turkey, right? Which is why it was called Iran and Turan.
Turan, yeah.
Because the implication was that even though it was Turkic, it was part of the Iranian cultural fold. The language of civilization, of culture and everything was Farsi. So there's also an Iranian agenda at play out there, which won't really support a Turkish agenda at all. There'll be lots of fun happening out there. That area has always been fun in those terms, you know. So it's not settled, not by far. At most, their influence will go with Azerbaijan, but not beyond Azerbaijan. And even through Azerbaijan, because it depends very heavily on Turkey for gas exports and things like that, because ultimately it has to go through there, given the hostility of other countries around it.
Would you think the US would be interested in a pan-Turkic corridor, that sort of thing? Because that would increase their influence in the region. Turkey is already a member of NATO. Obviously not a very good member of NATO, not a very obedient one.
And the answer lies there. They don't want a thing which will not be absolutely controllable by them. Right? So they'll also want to kind of break that corridor up. India doesn't want that corridor.
We don't know. Iran doesn't want that.
Iran doesn't want it. Russia doesn't want it. There is nobody in that area that wants that corridor. So like I said, it'll be like SARC, toothless tiger.
Okay, what do you make of the situation in the Ukraine conflict? It's just meandering right now, kind of a long war thing. But do you think something could happen at some point in time?
I think what the Russians are now waiting for is simply a complete collapse of funding and interest from the West.
Okay.
And a collapse of morale and troops in Ukraine.
Okay.
They're just planning on sitting it out. I think this is a classic long war of attrition, which carries on for I thought initially 4 years, but now it might even drag on to 6, 7, 8 years, till the point where the fatigue is so absolute and complete that Russia just waltzes right through.
Yeah. So eventually, do you see the nation being partitioned along the Dnieper or something?
I don't think they'll even allow partition.
Okay.
They will insist on the complete neutralization and Finlandization of Ukraine, wherein it is not allowed to have. Basically, they will be like what Bhutan is to India.
Okay.
You're not allowed to have embassies or treaties with any country without Indian permission. You can have trade ties and everything fine, but you'll probably end up seeing a Ukraine settle with bullshit like gross national happiness indices.
Let's talk about the other flashpoints. The other major flashpoints are India, Pakistan, India, China. More India, China. And China has been very provocative of late. Statements, words, lots of words, no action. What do you make of that? What are they trying to achieve through all these daily provocations? Multiple verbal attacks per day. Either it's the Global Times or it's their spokespeople. What are they trying to do? Is it like sledging in sports?
I think it's a bit more coordinated than that. I think it's some kind of maskirovka happening for some kind of military action somewhere.
Okay.
But who is it directed against? Is it going to be directed against Taiwan or India? Personally, I feel it's going to be directed against Vietnam.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. See, they won the 62 war.
Yes.
They won the civil war against Chiang Kai-shek. Vietnam is the only war they lost.
Yes, 79.
79.
Yes.
That's a historical aberration that needs correction.
Okay.
I personally feel that is the historical record they will choose to correct, as opposed to a Taiwan invasion. I don't think they'll invade Taiwan till they're absolutely guaranteed of success. Because a failure would be very, very bad for Xi Jinping.
Oh, devastating.
So I don't think he'll do that. Because we've started building border defenses finally and started putting facts on the ground,
Yes.
which the Congress never did. They might find a campaign against us easier now, but not as easy as it was, say, 10 years back.
Yes.
On the other hand, it might be the Putin calculus vis-a-vis Ukraine, which is that, look, the Ukrainians are getting stronger and stronger. is it better I attack now and thwart it no matter what the cost, rather than not being able to do it 10 years down the line? What if Xi Jinping makes that same calculus against us?
Vis-a-vis us.
Vis-a-vis us. Taiwan, though, he's not going to win. Let's be clear about that. There's no way he's going to cross those straits and pull off anything realistic out there. But here is a better chance than there. I think his best chance is Vietnam, followed by us number 2.
Okay.
Followed by Taiwan number 3, which I don't think is a chance at all.
So let's say he goes to war with Vietnam, Xi Jinping. What would be the pretext? Would it be the Spratly Islands? Would it be something else?
It could be anything. I mean, he doesn't really need a pretext, you see. You can manufacture a pretext. You can carry out a false flag attack. Have a Russian destroyer shell and kill Chinese troops on some artificial island in the Spratly chain. And claim the Vietnamese didn't go in. I mean, this is very,
it's happened in the past. It's been known to happen.
It's known to happen, right? So, why should that even surprise us? I think that's what, that would be the most, but see, this is our rationality. It's not Xi Jinping's rationality. And the problem with Xi Jinping is that he's an extremely irrational guy from a normal game theory mindset. In his own mind, he makes a lot of sense. He doesn't make a lot of sense in anybody else's mind.
And if I were to go to war against us, what would be the objectives? Would it be Arunachal, Tawang, something else, or just humiliate India?
I think it would be an actual physical land grab. Because nothing screams humiliation more than a land grab. You see, killing troops doesn't act as humiliation. Whereas a land grab actually acts as humiliation. They would want a tangible humiliation. I think in all 3 cases, Taiwan, Vietnam, India, they would want tangible humiliation.
Do you think they're in a position to grab land from India, take land? The Himalayan border is really difficult to fight in, isn't it?
For a month, no.
The length of the duration of the war is
therein lies the danger.
But they're also stretched thin when it comes to Tibet, right? They've got a couple of...
they are stretched thin, but for example, what if we repeat the mistake of 62? In 62, we had our Air Force was infinitely more powerful than theirs. We never deployed it.
We did not deploy that.
What if we take a decision like Vajpayee? Vajpayee took the decision, Kargil, we will not hit inside Pakistan.
Yes.
What if we take a decision that we're not going to interdict their supply lines? You see, therein lies the problem. Because the onus will be on us to localize the war and not to escalate. That is what I suspect, that is what the UN Security Council will demand.
They will demand for us to not escalate.
Well, they will say that the conflict needs to be confined here.
Well, why should the onus lie on us?
The same reason that the onus is on Israel to prevent an escalation of the conflict.
So let's say we are under pressure to localize the conflict, not let it expand beyond a certain,
You can't win a war of attrition without bombing the train lines coming into Tibet.
Absolutely.
Without bombing the Tibet industrial base.
Indeed.
And bombing the marshalling yards in Shigatse and Lhasa and what's the town close to here? Angari, Khotan and all those places. Khotan will be the main supply thing for Angari.
So if there's a war, we'll have to hit those.
We will have to.
Those targets.
We will have to. Otherwise, you settle in for a war of attrition. In which case, China's industrial strength will always prevail.
But if we hit those targets, we may be in danger of taking over some territory. That's dangerous.
Would that be bad?
Would that be bad? I don't see it as bad.
I don't see it as bad.
But the political leadership may see it as bad.
It may. The thing is, remember, this is where China's nuclear doctrine comes into play. Because it does not have a first strike, a stated first strike policy.
Neither do we.
Except, and this is where the Chinese doctrine is different from ours.
It's ambiguous.
Ours is a unambiguous no first strike.
Their
no first strike is with regards to foreign land. On their land, they retain the right to first strike.
Well, let them. Do they want to play the game?
The question is, we want to play the game.
Well, who stands to lose more? They've built up this entire economy over the past 40 years. They've built up a huge economy.
We'll be using nuclear weapons in an area where there is no economy. It's just barren.
The question is, where do we want to use our nukes? Let's say they target us with their nukes somewhere.
Again, if you look at the UN, the International Court of Justice's judgment on this, which held that the use of nuclear weapons is legal subject to the rules of proportionality.
Well, that's okay. Once there's a war, I think the UN can go to hell. And
It can go to hell.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, are we really willing to use nuclear weapons in a counter-population strategy in response to a counter-force strike by the Chinese?
That's a call we will have to make. Yeah.
And that would be a significant escalation.
That would be a significant escalation. All bets are off once that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, because of the way a war of attrition works, it always favors the more industrial state.
Yes.
And where your military facilities, your military production is co-located with civilian facilities, a counter-force strike will also, or a counter-industrial strike in this case, would essentially also be a counter-population strike.
Indeed. Absolutely.
So the escalation will be deemed an Indian escalation. Have our folks thought that through? Are they willing to, poke the tiger that way? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a very, very, I wouldn't want to be the decision maker. I don't want to touch that decision with a barge pole.
Yeah.
And the problem with India is when it comes to decisions, we're very good at kicking the decision to somebody else.
Yes.
And ultimately it lands up with the fellow who doesn't have much experience, and he takes the decision, and it's not necessarily a well-considered decision. So, I don't know. I don't know.
But let's say we were to make all the right decisions. Let's say hypothetically we make all the right decisions. What happens in that scenario in case both the nations go to all-out war and we make all the right decisions, including the hard and difficult decisions of hitting the Chinese industrial, sites where the population lies. In that case, can China win a war against India without losing too much of its industrial base?
I can think of several scenarios where India manages to demilitarize Tibet without actual physical control of Tibet, because Tibet is a very difficult region to control.
Enormous. Huge.
It only has few lines of supply which are very easily interdictable. And once you've interdicted supply routes, sorry, that's jargon. Once you've attacked supply routes and put them out of commission, you're essentially dealing with hyper-localized Chinese power, which is relatively easy to take out.
Yes.
China is not going to sit by and let us do that. And that is where a different kind of escalation happens. What will that escalation be?
They could hit Delhi.
They could hit Delhi. They could
That's
hit
one
Kolkata and things like that. They might start off with the secondary cities. Kolkata has essentially become a secondary city now for all effects and purposes. It's no longer what it was. They might hit Kolkata. They might hit Aizawl. They might hit Guwahati. Not nuclear, but even large-scale cruise missile attacks and things.
Cruise missiles are okay, but they better not use ballistic missiles because you don't know what's coming in.
You don't know what's coming in, but the assumption will, of course, be, the thing about a second, this is the downfall of a second strike doctrine, is that you have to wait for confirmation of nuclear strike before you hit.
There you go.
You do not assume, it's not a retaliation on launch, it is a retaliation on reception strike.
On detonation.
On detonation. So they can use ballistic missiles as well, or hypersonic missiles, whatever they want to. There are too many vectors here where it ends up being a prolonged war of attrition.
Okay.
And in a war of attrition, let's face it, we are nowhere near the industrial strength of China.
Indeed. So once again, we have to hit the industrial strength.
And as Ukraine is finding out, when you depend too much on the outside world for weapons, especially countries that only produce very expensive weapons, it becomes unsustainable.
So India can't win a war of attrition, a long war. Essentially.
Yeah. We can't win a long war, but we can win a war. But that's not the same as not winning a war. We can win a war.
We can win a war.
Yeah. Just not a long war.
Not a long war.
You localize it to a month. You make all the right choices.
Yes.
Don't localize it to the forward edge of the battle area. Localize it to Tibet.
To Tibet.
And parts of Xinjiang. And yes, you can.
What's the naval angle in this war? Because, well, that's something we don't talk about. We can really,
you can really cause a lot of damage navally.
Yeah,
right?
navally.
You can pretty much stop China's shipping comprehensively stop it.
Comprehensively, yes.
You can take out the Liaoning attack group within the first 2-3 days of a war.
Yeah.
If you concentrate enough naval air power or land-based naval strikes, massed strikes. The question is, again, you see, are you willing to take certain choices? So, for example, the big mistake that Argentina made in the Falklands was to tell its pilots to avoid the Harriers, whereas their strategy should have been, I don't care if I lose 20 Mirages, I want all those Harriers taken out.
And they're done.
They didn't.
Yeah.
After the first dogfight, they said, please don't attack the Harriers. And essentially that was the point at which the battle was lost. Are you willing to take, say, 100 planes downed in the attack on the Liaoning group? Because once Liaoning is sunk, or the Liaoning battle group is sunk, you essentially put the Chinese Navy in a defensive mode.
Why even use planes? Mass produce the BrahMos.
Yeah.
All you need is a certain number.
Now, because there is no longer any range limitation on it, you can go up to about 700, 800 kilometers.
Yeah.
I believe we should have a heck of a lot of BrahMoses land.
1,000 BrahMoses, why not?
Station it on the Andamans and use it to terrorize that entire area.
Yeah.
But then you need to focus on satellite intel.
Yeah.
To find out the registry of ships, which ones are false flagged ships, which ones are real ships, because most ships are Greek or Panamanian owned or Bahamian owned and things like that. Which of them, you need to have a very good port registry and port monitor to figure out which ships are coming from China and which ships are going to China.
Yes.
Because, they can enter false registers as well. They can say they're going to Taiwan and rock up in Hong Kong port or Guangzhou port and things like that. The naval thing is something I'm actually more confident about than the land thing. The land I would have been more confident about had we been much more air-centric. But the naval one, I'm pretty damn confident about. Even if we take wrong decisions, I think the naval scenario will be much more propitious to us than the land situation. We can afford mistakes in the sea. We can't afford those mistakes on air, on land. But the naval aspect's not something I'm so worried about. Will a few submarines get through and inflict damage? Yes. The question is, how prepared is your population to deal with those strikes? See, you can't have it like, you remember with IC-814 when it was hijacked?
Yes.
When Rupin Katyal was killed. The families were bloody camping outside the PMO, haranguing everybody who went to the PMO. And ultimately you had to give ground.
Yes.
And the price we paid was Mumbai later and lots of other terror attacks later, which cost thousands more lives.
Yes.
Do you have a society that's willing to take loss? Because let's face it, with China, it's all about how much you're willing to absorb.
Yeah, that's right.
And how much of a lack of, even in 62, because your command staff is so goddamn incompetent, chosen purely because they were filleting Nehru, as opposed to a serious professional like Sam Manekshaw. The first thing Sam Manekshaw did when he was posted out there was go there and say, gentlemen, there will be no more retreat from now on. End of story. Nehru was willing to give up Assam, remember? He was willing to run.
Yes.
Manekshaw went there and said, no more retreat. Full stop. And by that time, of course, lots of other things had happened.
Yes.
But now I don't think this government will behave like Nehru. I think they will be the type who will completely back somebody like Sam Manekshaw. Heck, Indira Gandhi didn't behave like Nehru. Indira Gandhi was 10 times the man her father ever was.
Yes.
Her father was nothing compared to her.
Yeah.
You can accuse Indira Gandhi of a lot of things, criminalizing politics, corruption, this and that. But a lack of patriotism and a lack of guts was never, and a lack of diplomatic brains, agility, was never one of her problems. She was better than anybody we've ever had in that aspect. And I think this government will be exactly like that. They will, but my big question mark is when it comes to escalation. So if we go by the past, where they were willing to escalate Pulwama to a strike into Pakistan proper,
yes,
that is one of the historical analogies you can say where the government will not localize it to the forward edge of the battle area, but in fact localize it to Tibet. I don't know, because each situation is same as the previous situation, but each situation is also completely new situation.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
But considering what we all just discussed, would it make sense for Xi Jinping to start a war with India?
Yeah.
He could stand to lose a lot, actually.
He could, but think of it from his point of view. Where does he have to go? All his investments are backfiring. The trains are shambles. That's $1 trillion lost out there.
Okay.
Construction industry, $3 trillion lost out there. The whole of Chinese construction is a great big sham. Okay. Your entire economy is essentially running on bogus bullshit, which you're recapitalizing. All the bad loans are hidden, recapitalized and things like that. How long can you sustain an economy like that? And in order for his purges to work, he constantly needs new balika bakras, so to say, sacrificial goats,
Okay.
to create that perpetual sense of siege. Corruption only works so long. So, for example, Mao Zedong could only run not cultural revolution came later, Thousand Flowers Bloom and this and that twice before, and after that he felt the need to attack India.
Yeah.
And Vietnam ultimately, and that was Deng Xiaoping.
Deng Xiaoping.
But they need the external bakra at some point.
Okay.
What is the threshold for him? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Vietnam might be too small to give him the victory he seeks. India might be the right size.
What about Japan? Japan is a US fortress, isn't it?
It is. And I think he knows very well that Japan will give him a very bloody nose. Because, Japan, in spite of all its so-called pacifism and all of that, is not a country. I mean, I would think 100 times, I would much rather launch a war on Taiwan than launch a war on Japan. That is not, first of all, the history, of two fleets of Kublai Khan being destroyed, not one, two fleets being comprehensively destroyed by the Japanese. Everybody massacred, every ship sunk.
Yeah.
Once thanks to the winds, but the second one was an actual war. They tried landing the
Tsushima and all that. Yeah.
Tsushima and all of that.
Yeah.
They massacred whole populations, fine, but the Japanese thrashed them right royally.
Yeah.
Most of the fleet could not return home. It was as cataclysmic as, Napoleon's march to Moscow, essentially.
Yeah.
Kublai Khan could never mount an offensive after those things. It's a much greater distance to travel. It's a much more powerful force. The Japanese Navy tonnage is insane. Even though they have fewer fighters and things, the arming of those fighters, the technology level of those fighters, they're probably the most sophisticated export fighters ever given to a foreign country, even more so than Israel. And the Japanese themselves, every time we talk to the Americans, they'll be like, look, Korea has good technology, but there's nothing Korea can offer us that we don't already have, that we want from them, and we're willing to trade our crown jewels for. With the Japanese, the Americans tell us that, they have such extraordinary technology that the Americans are willing to share some of their crown jewels with the Japanese in return for certain Japanese technologies. They never tell us what those technologies are, because they are not systems, they are subsystems, or they're components of subsystems, clearly.
Okay.
But they do. This is not a country you want to take lightly. Remember, the Americans had to expend so much energy defeating Japan.
Yeah.
I don't think China has the...
And you might end up remilitarizing the population. I mean, that's a pacifist population. But if there's an attack on the country, they may that fighting spirit may wake up.
It just might.
Just might.
You see, it just might. And then where you go. So I don't think Japan, I would almost say zero chance of Japan.
Kissinger said just before he died, a few months before he died, that Japan could very well become a nuclear weapons power in the next 5 years.
They already are.
A shadow power, shadow nuclear power.
Look, if it, in terms of their stockpile, they already have highly enriched uranium and plutonium enough for 120 to 150 weapons.
Okay, they have the
it's lying there,
fissile material.
It's fissile material, and because they're an NPT power, it is all completely legal. Okay, it is totally legal to have those stockpiles. The Americans today say they wish they had foreseen that situation and not had that kind of thing, because Japan was very smart and they did it in a totally legal way.
Okay.
Today, the nuclear powers say, well, we wish we had thought of these scenarios, but there's nothing we can do. It's a treaty is a treaty is a treaty. You can't just post facto change it like that and then impose retrospective whatever on them. Their technology is at such a state that if they want to make a bomb, it'll take them at most a month to make a bomb. Because you look at all the core technologies that they have for precision implosion.
Yeah.
Maybe not a fusion bomb, but definitely a fission.
A fission bomb,
right?
yeah.
A gun type assembly or an implosion type assembly. Any of those assemblies, you look at the basic
engineering know-how. Yeah.
It already exists, right? So, for example, one of the things for an implosion assembly where the spheres have to be perfectly engineered and the spherical explosives around it have to be perfectly engineered. A lot of it you can determine by looking at the state of your optics industry, because glass is ground. Telescopes and things are ground to perfect spheres. Domes have to be perfect spheres, and in fact, even French Areva reactors depend on the Japanese reactor dome, which is a very precise piece of engineering. Only Japan, Mitsubishi, makes those domes. Every Western reactor today has a Japanese dome to it, because nobody except Mitsubishi makes them properly.
I see.
So, and it's a perfect sphere. A lot of the engineering required is not the same, but it's very similar.
Very similar.
So, we know that a lot of the skills exist. Precision, sequencing and timing, of course it exists. We know if they put their mind to it, 1 month tops they can make it.
So that could be a big danger for China. I mean,
it's a huge danger.
So China essentially, if you look at it, it's kind of surrounded by enemies, and they've made these enemies on their own.
And whose fault is that? It's
their
exactly
own
like you
fault.
said, it's their own damn fault.
Yeah.
They sorted out all their land problems just to create a whole load of naval problems.
They've reopened the Ussuri
Every single thing.
The Ussuri issue.
Yeah. Every bloody thing they've reopened. So, this... think of Xi Jinping as a Nikol Pashinyan with nuclear weapons. Incompetent, inept. He forgot all the lessons that Deng Xiaoping tried to inculcate in China. He showed his hands too early. He played his cards too early. Because that crouching tiger, hidden dragon is a metaphor for don't act your size till you know nobody else is your own size.
Hide and bide. Yeah.
Xi Jinping did. He should have first waited to become number 1 before he took out his claws.
Yeah.
He was quite a distant number 2. And a distant number 2 only individually. If you look at the world cumulatively and collectively, he's a 3rd or 4th rank player at best.
It's a third. Hard power. Cumulatively. Yes.
Cumulative.
Yeah.
He did what he did. And people don't talk about the fact how much turmoil the Chinese army is in. Today you could be in charge of personnel, tomorrow you'll be made in charge of air defense artillery. And a parachute commander will be put in charge, a paratroop commander will be put in charge of logistics. And a logistics commander will be made a infantry division commander. Because he wants to coup-proof the army. You see, he's petrified. He's petrified that the army is the last bastion left that can remove him.
I'm glad that's happening.
I'm totally...
Yeah.
So this is what I keep saying. Xi Jinping's stupidity is India's greatest asset, except when it isn't, because the problem with people like that is they're so irrational. There's a rationality to their irrationality, but you have to understand the rationality in their irrationality. He's not a nut job like, say, Qin Shi Huangdi, but he's a rational lunatic in that sense. I don't understand the rationality in him. But when you have a military that is so much under turmoil, the worry is the Air Force isn't under turmoil. You see, he's moved it because part of coup-proofing the military was moving towards air centrism. An Air Force can't take over power, but an army can.
An army can, yes.
Except, of course, Pinochet used the Air Force very effectively to take over power, and Bashar al-Assad was Syrian Air Force. Though I still haven't read any convincing account of how an Air Force commander could take over power when the army could not. But he thinks in his mind that Air forces can't take over power and armies can. So he's focusing on the Air Force, which actually makes it slightly more dangerous for us. Air centrism is not a path we want our enemies going down.
Indeed. How do you see the relationship between Russia and China? Are they long-term natural adversaries, or are they going to keep on cooperating the way they are right now?
You know, I'm going to quote my old boss, Raja Mohan. If I hate someone, I wish China upon you. Now, the issue is, we don't hate the Russians. They've stood by us.
Yeah.
They've been very good friends to us. You know? I think they've always come through when we've actually needed them on whatever. And we've been trying very hard to prevent them. In fact, a lot of our engagement with Russia is to prevent them from going over completely to the Chinese.
Okay.
But see, how much pressure is Russia going to resist when you are stuck in a monopsony situation where all your commodities and energy is bought by only one country? You know, it's only a matter of time. I think they will realize that Chinese suzerainty is a very nasty kind of suzerainty, but it won't come with the kind of nastiness that, say, American or NATO involved in the West. Because remember, Putin, as masterful as is, I disagree with it, but he at least had his facts, not the interpretation of the facts, which I disagree with. But he was on his facts when he gave both the Tucker interview and his speech when he announced the war. He was so completely clueless about China. China has never started a war. They've only fought defensive wars. He said that to Tucker. So Putin is absolutely illiterate when it comes to Eastern history.
Maybe he's willfully dissembling.
In which case he's already bent over and offered his bum to Xi Jinping.
Makes sense. Yeah.
In which case...
But let's say he's clueless. Let's say he's illiterate.
If he's illiterate, he's going to learn a lesson. If he's already offered himself to Xi Jinping, then, you know, I mean, the sum of all our fears come true. But it's not the first time we faced this situation. Remember, from 1947 to 1965, when the Sino-Soviet split came out completely in the open. So for almost about, 12 years, we dealt with a very similar situation. And we managed it pretty damn well. We managed it so that the Soviet Union never really helped the Chinese against us. I think we can still manage that. I think. I'm not sure. I think. But it's not a situation I want to be under. Which is why our relation with Russia, and see, this depends so much on industrialization. This is why industrialization is key. And I think this third term of Modi, there are a lot of signs. Because remember, the real industrialization of Gujarat happened in Modi's third term. The first term, almost nothing happened. The second term, a lot of reforms happened. The third term is when galloping industrialization of Gujarat happened, the effects of which you are seeing today.
Yes.
Because it's never stopped. Right? Today you go to Surat. They are telling you that they are building a high-speed train from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. I disagree with that. I believe it's a high-speed train to Surat from Ahmedabad and Mumbai because they've planned for Surat to overtake both Mumbai and Ahmedabad combined. Okay. Mumbai is limited by space on how much it can grow. Surat has a lot of space.
Yes.
Centrally located. You look at the diamond bourse out there, boss, it is insane. And now they're building a textile bourse out there. They will soon build lots of other bourses out there where all the business is going to congregate into Surat. I think the third term you will, I hope, the third term is where you will see genuine industrialization happening with, you know, your labor laws, your land laws and things all being reformed, your regulatory reforms, which, you know, Gautam Chikarmani is already, you read that report, criminalized for doing business in India. They're working on all of that. And that is when your thirst for Russian commodities will grow. And there is a limitation of gas that you can bring from there. But there is no limitation on commodities that you can bring. The
Right.
more commodity dependent we get on Russia, the more Russia has other friends to go to.
So it's like a pressure release valve. India can act as that.
Exactly. See, in a pressure cooker, you have two pressure releases, one of which was an Indian invention.
Mm-hmm.
The Indian invention was the gasket.
The gasket, okay.
Because when the whistle fails, the gasket functions. Because steel is very strong, the gasket without exploding will give way and allow pressure to release. So we're giving them, there is already a whistle, we're providing them with the gasket. I think this is very important. And this is why we should be reinforcing our case, which we've incidentally done very well. You know, the number of diplomats I was speaking to in 22, from February to July 22, who were so completely stressed out. Imagine MEA Babus being stressed out
Okay.
at the amount of pressure and American threats they were facing in private.
I see.
By July, most of those threats had dissipated.
Okay.
Most of the pressure had dissipated. By October, it was almost completely gone.
I see.
Where the Americans went from, what kind of a position is this? This is a bullshit position. You're not our friend. We'll have to reconsider our relations with you too. Okay, it's a well thought out position. We don't agree with it, but it's fine.
Okay.
We held our own. That says a lot. And we made a very strategic decision because we realized right in the first weeks of the war that this is not a war that Ukraine could win. And this was actually a great, both a tactical and a strategic success of India. And a tactical and strategic failure on America's part that they did not see that this was an unwinnable war. I mean, their calculus is different, which is we'll fight to the last Ukrainian because it saves us from fighting to the last American.
Yes.
But well, I mean, it is what it is. I think it'll make life tougher for us. It'll be a more complex situation. But I think we've got the skill set and the leadership set required to make that happen. Provisional on the fact that the third term sees genuine industrialization.
Right.
And the creation of a lot more leverage on Moscow. Commodities, diamonds, industrial diamonds even, molybdenum, new age materials, all of that. I think we should be buying vast mines in Russia and exploiting that. And we should, I believe, make them work share partners in certain high-tech areas where their high-tech industry is completely dependent on us.
Okay. Right. What do you make of the Pakistani, this initiative they took that they want to resume trade with India? They want, they unilaterally stopped that after the Article 370 thing, 2019. Now they want to resume trade with India. So do you think they are they have some ulterior motive behind this, or it's just something they're throwing out?
So you'll excuse me for using very crude terminology now. This is like a hemorrhoid patient who's already had an operation for hemorrhoids, who's completely sorted out. The doctors have sorted out his hemorrhoid problem, so his pichwada is no longer on fire. And the hemorrhoid is now negotiating with him saying, let me grow once more. Because, this is like a one-handed clap, boss. We get along fine. We don't need trade with you.
Yeah.
Right? You need trade with us. We don't need diddly squat from you.
Yeah.
We have zero intention of giving you anything. We are not going to give you zero wriggle room. There is no international pressure on us to give you any wriggle room.
Yes.
Because we're not doing it aggressively. We're just saying, boss, we don't want to deal with these guys. Fuck you. That's it. Okay? That's it. That's literally it. So they can make all... I was sitting there and laughing. Thinking, bhai, this is literally like a beggar outside Antilla going and knocking on Neeta Bhabhi's Rolls Royce ka darwaza saying, hey Neeta Bhabhi, तेरे पति को ना इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं आता है, मेरे से बात कर, मैं तेरे को इन्वेस्टमेंट दूंगा, अब वैसे भी 2 कौड़ी दे देना इधर. It's like, come along यार, अपनी औकात समझो. नीता भाभी का एक necklace is worth more, that 500 carat emerald necklace she was wearing is probably worth more than the GDP of Punjab, Pakistani Punjab right now. औकात भी कुछ होनी चाहिए ना.
But do you think there's a different motivation. The Pakistanis want to become part of BRICS, the expanded BRICS, and there could be something of that.
It would be foolish to let them be part of anything.
The Chinese are
At all.
pushing for that.
Let them. Let them. They can keep pushing. We should keep saying no.
Yeah.
Because it would be foolish to let them into anything at all till they have mentally let go of Kashmir. See, this people tend to forget that, the last Mexican army raids into America were in 1901 and 1902. It was after that the balance of power between the two became so great that Mexico essentially lost any realistic hope of getting New Mexico and Texas and Arizona and California back.
Yeah.
And people tend to forget that Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California are all occupied territory. They're technically Mexican territory.
Oh, yes.
Illegally occupied by America in wars of aggression.
Yes.
And incidentally, Texas was exactly like Donetsk and Lugansk, where they declared independence and invited somebody to come occupy them in that sense.
Yeah.
But Mexico gave up. And the last general to preside over the crushing of those Mexican raids was a guy called Omar Bradley, after whom the Bradley tank APC is, not Omar Bradley, sorry. It was Bradley, it was Bradley. After whom the ICV is named, M2. You need to reach that stage. It doesn't have to be a military defeat. It has to be a psychological pacification. Where you realize the difference between us is so great now that you don't really stand a chance. You don't want a Finlandization of Pakistan, but if you can achieve a Mexicoization of Pakistan, even that's acceptable.
Right.
But till then, no.
Do you think Russia would be under Chinese pressure to allow Pakistan to come into BRICS?
They already are.
They are.
Huge.
But what's the deal with BRICS? I mean, does every nation that's a member of BRICS get a veto against who comes in and who doesn't?
Yes, you for all effects and purposes, you can stop it.
Okay.
My worry sometimes is that India tries to play nice.
Okay.
Which we shouldn't. I think we need to be as clear about this. China keeps vetoing new terrorists being put on the terror watch list. We should do that. We should be absolutely unapologetic about it. And what does Pakistan bring? Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. Even their leverage on us, which was the ability to make terror out here, is now gone. Kashmir is now, except small parts of the Pir Panjal, is completely pacified. Sure, you'll have terror attacks. Nobody can stop terror attacks.
Yeah.
But the insurgency is over.
Yes.
Okay. Khalistan maybe, there will be probably terror attacks, but there will be no insurgency anymore. Okay. Of course, Khalistan only exists in the minds of certain people. Okay? The reality is we control them by the balls if we want to. And that's that. So Pakistan has no leverage on us. We don't need them for anything.
Yes.
Anything at all. And in fact, this is the most crucial point. If we give in to all these things, sure, they're at this point today, but will they be at the same point 25 years down the line?
Yeah.
No. And this is why I've always said the Taliban are our friends. They are secular, progressive feminists.
Yes.
Who I completely support. I have many friends in the Taliban. I have eaten Kabuli polo and chicken shish kebab with sangak bread in their houses. They're charming, lovely people. They're genuine human rights activists. In fact, the Taliban are some of the kindest, nicest, most generous people I've ever met.
Okay.
I want India to get to know the Taliban better. I would like to see the Taliban leadership welcome Modi someday in Kabul. I would like Modi to welcome the Taliban leadership to Delhi someday. Because I think the Taliban will act as a civilizing force on Pakistan. You see, Pakistan is a very violent country. They need the kind of peace and pacification the Taliban has brought to Afghanistan.
They have, indeed.
They have.
Yes.
And, they have done more. I honestly believe that, what's the head mullah's name? Mullah...
Biradar? Akhundzai? Yeah.
Should get the Nobel Prize because he has brought peace after such a long time to a extremely unstable area, and he should certainly be given the Bharat Ratna for sure.
Oh, yes.
As a precursor to it. So I'm very clear about this. Just as you know, there were many commanders in the north in Syria who the Americans labeled moderate, who were genuinely nice, moderate people.
Oh yes.
तेरे को बहुत गाली पड़ने वाली है because lots of people don't get it. But anyway, I will happily open my house to the Taliban. I would encourage all our viewers to visit Afghanistan. It's a gorgeous country. And make friends with the Taliban. Build people-to-people contacts with the Taliban. Unless you're vegetarian, in which case, you won't be able to eat much out there. But if you're non-vegetarian, please build people-to-people contacts with them. Call over your Taliban friends to your house. They're lovely people, and Afghanistan has been long live India-Taliban friendship, long live India-Afghan friendship.
Completely support that. There's this narrative in the West that India is backsliding as a democracy, India is becoming increasingly dictatorial, Modi is illiberal, fascist, all of that. And you seeing Indian origin writers, authors, journalists putting out these articles that promote this worldview and this narrative. What do you make of that? What are they trying to achieve? Is India actually becoming a dictatorship?
The notion that we're becoming a dictatorship or democratic backsliding is an extraordinarily unfactual, ahistorical, unacademic, shockingly untutored point of view. People don't realize the kind of speech and action controls we had in India through the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s and 70s.
Indeed.
Right? I think Anand Ranganathan's thread lists all of that out. The problem is it's a Twitter thread which can't be referenced in academic convention. There has to be a piece written on it for it to be academically referenced. And then you had the period, the coalition era from the 90s to the till 2014.
Yes.
Where it was a weak state which simply wasn't implementing all the laws that were on the books.
Yeah.
But sometimes when it did, it used to go overboard. Like those activists, anti-nuclear activists who were beaten up outside, what was the Tamil Nadu nuclear reactor called?
Kalpakkam?
Kalpakkam.
Yeah.
No, it was the new reactor, no? I forget now.
Okay.
They were. And all of them were charged. 11,000 people were charged with sedition.
Okay, 11,000.
11,000 in one shot.
Okay.
And I support Chidambaram doing that. Chidambaram was the home minister then. He sent the police to break them up, beat them up, and charge them all with sedition and throw them in jail.
Okay.
It was all church-inspired protests, by the way. Church-funded, church-inspired protests. I'll always salute Chidambaram for that. Okay. Whatever his other faults on internal security, he's always been... he's a much better internal security guy than he's a finance guy.
Okay.
So I will always support that. But then for them to suddenly say that there is democratic, why? Because there's one party dominance. That dominance is how? It is the same election system. If anything, the kind of checks and balances to ensure voter integrity and election integrity are like never before. How is it that in spite of all this so-called democratic backsliding, the Congress manages to win Telangana by a landslide or some others? When they win, it is not voter integrity.
Yeah.
So, this is very lazy third-rate opinion. But my issue really is with Indians. First are, the trash that we've exported abroad, which, I've always had a problem with these NRI trash. Because their need for validation from foreigners is so great. I mean, I'm a homosexual, but I think they are much more homosexual than I am because they lower their pants for any white man that's willing to give them a validation. I would never do that. They would. Okay. So, pura that entire, they might as well rename NRIs as Rashtriya Samlaingik, Rashtriya Occasional Samlaingik Log. उसका क्या है? राष्ट्रीय ROSL. This is your NRIs. And you might as well rename your Pravasi Bharat Award. क्या वो award क्या है? Pravasi Bharat क्या? पुरस्कार. To Pravasi Samlangik पुरस्कार. साले कहेंगे. Anyway, तो क्या होता है? Their need for validation means that whatever the talking point is, they all have to go overboard in that talking points. You know, it is more loyal than the white man to the white man.
Yes.
You know, this is like, all those brown people that used to write to the British that we need you to civilize us and things like that.
Yes.
And the biggest one of them used to be Kanti Vajpayee's grandfather, you know that, no? Who was the foreign secretary, the first foreign secretary of India, essentially.
Okay.
Was our first ambassador to America when it was called the Indian agent in America.
I see.
The agent of the British Empire in India to America, or whatever it was called.
Okay.
Who was completely anti-independence, by the way.
I see.
And they depend, which is why to this day they venerate the Nehrus, because people who should have been kicked out, drummed out of the bureaucracy, were maintained and elevated. But anyway, what ends up happening here is, with the NRIs, I have zero expectations. I've conveyed my high regard for them in as beautifully civilized language as I possibly could. With these Goras, you look at this woman, Hannah Ellis Peterson, who came down, who claims that she will change, one writing of hers will change the government in India and all of that bullshit. Now, ever since I highlighted that, she's gone on this thing calling me a liar. I never said that, this and that. She literally pushed a piece that was handwritten by the ISI in Rawalpindi with actual factual errors. She put up a photo of Riaz Ahmed, who wasn't that Riaz Ahmed. It was actually a guy in Indian custody, still alive, in a jail somewhere in Kashmir. She changed the name of the plot from Gurpatwant Pannu death to Gurpatwant Pannu plot. And the Guardian still hasn't even put a correction out there saying it was changed from death to plot. Now, it is only in India, which is such a hygienic society, that you will accept trailer park white trash who don't even wash their bums. And when they sit on your sofas and they sweat, they leave big yellow patches of God knows what on your sofas. Will you invite this kind of trash to your house and treat them as anything? This kind of trash shouldn't even be let into your living rooms. Dogs are more hygienic when they come in than this Hannah Ellis Peterson kind of people. But this is what they let into their house. You know, this is the kind of cockney shit. The children of, Whitehall ladies of the night who used to come and be a colonel or a lance corporal out here from the British Army, who Maharajas would entertain and go hunting with.
Yeah.
Why? Because he's white. And he's just a lance corporal. But he's a white lance corporal. The brown lance corporal, they would treat like dirt.
Yeah.
In their own thing. But white lance corporal has come, who was the son of a Liverpool coal worker. Oh, come, let me serve you on the finest Limoges china and, Galway crystal and all of that in my palace. Sleep on my own bed, if you will. You know? This acute inferiority complex that we have in taking the word of all this inbred white trash. This fellow Edward Luce, who literally knew India the way Esther knew the king, slept his way around Delhi and Kolkata and God knows where. Trash like William Dalrymple. How the hell do you allow a white piece of shit to become your interlocutor on history to the outside world? Benami property mein rehta hai. He claims it's somebody else's, but if you do a proper tax investigation into him, you'll find a lot of shit happening with that Jaipur Lit Fest and William Dalrymple's involvement in it and all that shit. You have that fellow James Crabtree who used to come down and wax eloquent. Stanley Pignall, who used to literally wear those pith hats for hunting native brownies and things like that. This notion that somehow dirty, low-born white trash have somehow who on 2-3 year postings, boss, I am 46 years old. How old are you?
47.
40. We don't claim to, our knowledge of India is almost next to nothing compared to the size and complexity of this country.
Completely agree.
We only can shine light on maybe 1% of the Indian reality.
Yes.
Okay. We don't have this kind of arrogance that some Gora piece of shit has while coming to India on a 2-3 year, maximum 4-year stint and telling us about our country that we know your country better, really?
Yeah.
You never go outside bloody 5-star lobbies and Italian Cultural Center or same whatever group you have, and you know this country better than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of shit. Why are they given visa extensions? Because they keep promising all these babus. You find the babus who give these people or who oppose their visa extensions, you'll find invariably they're third-rate little lumps of shit to their children who somehow get scholarships to Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and things like that. Third-rate kids with first world education degrees. If that was the entrance level, then my dogs should be PhDs by now. Oxford and Cambridge PhDs by now. And they're good dogs, by the way. They're not like those little shits anyway. So, this is this sort of racial inferiority complex that we still have that we really need to stop having.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I've been very racist against white people because 99% of white people are actually the nicest, least racist, least judgmental people you'll meet. The problem with India is we're an asshole magnet where somehow we have this great propensity to drag in the most syphilitic, dirty, unwashed, Whitehall trash that we can find, be it French, be it American, be it British. Jerry Xi, plagiarizer, literal plagiarizer. His story on this, what raw agent or whatever trying to distort the narrative is plagiarized from a Pakistani think tank piece written 2 years back.
I see.
Based on the Twitter rantings of a deranged lunatic a week something or the other. This is the same guy who threatened to have Mamata Banerjee raped. Do you know that?
Really?
Yeah, there's an actual tweet of it. He wanted Mamata Banerjee raped and killed. He wanted some other politicians to be killed and things like that. And he has done this expose on somebody in Raw. We don't even know if this guy is Raw. You know? Or if he's even linked to the government. I mean, this is a country where a guy went to Kashmir claiming to be from the PMO and stayed at Kashmir government hospitality for 6, 7, 8 months and nobody figured out that he was a businessman from Gujarat. You remember that episode?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Okay. A guy claimed to be from the PMO.
Okay.
And he was let into the governor's office and he stayed at the government guest house for almost 6, 7 months. Why? Because he said, I'm from the PMO and nobody bothered checking.
I see.
This could have been anyone. Okay. And he's done all of this. Now imagine having such a bad source, a 2-3-year-old story being regurgitated and not calling out for plagiarism. These are third-rate, inbred trash. Of course, Jerry Xi isn't white trash, but you know, I guess he comes from a family that used to do foot binding or something and it somehow did, I don't know, cranial restructuring with genetic knockdown effects. But he will still be respected white because he's a proxy white man. And he wears this badge of being thrown out by the Chinese with great, it's absent any talent, it's the only badge of honor he has, you see. It's like people who don't have substance take every slap they got as a badge of honor. So that's his thing. But why are we so worried about the validation of others?
Yeah.
You know, this is an Indian weakness. I mean, we won't even be discussing this subject. Does America doesn't give a shit about what other people have to say about it.
Indeed.
It's only concerned about itself. Why are we as a nation so concerned about what every little white piece of dog shit has to say about us? You know, I don't think we should.
Yeah.
I think we should really be the types who sit and insist on our chairs being sanitized after white shit has sat on them for the simple reason that they don't wash their bum. Why are we applying different hygiene standards to this shit and different hygiene standards to ourselves?
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've covered a lot in this episode. Thank you so much. Always enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.